One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, I'm so excited about today's topic because we are talking about how to find your audience. So this is something that takes a little trial and error. And the reason why is if you're anything like me, I started my podcast over a year ago, and I was talking to an audience that was mostly friends and family while I figured out what the heck I was doing. And as time went on, I realized that there was a certain, like, very specific person that I wanted to connect with. And it wasn't necessarily everyone that was my friends and family. Like, I feel like there was like a few missing pieces to the specific things I wanted to talk about. And so we're just going to talk about how I found my audience, you lovely people that are listening right now, and how you can find your audience to listen to your podcast. So let's get started. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? Have you been wanting to start a podcast? You've been thinking about it. It feels right. You just know this is the next thing that my business needs. Well, I encourage you to sign up for my 5-day podcast bootcamp. This is a thing that you have been looking for. It is a 5-day video series where I walk you through exactly how to start, launch, and market your podcast, and I throw in some more information about planning strategies and being consistent and how you can make the most out of your podcast from day one. So sign up for our 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp at krystalprofit.com/podcast bootcamp. And do it already. You know that you've been wanting to, so just bite the bullet and join us. So as we're talking about finding your audience and everything you need to get started podcasting, I wanted to take a second and tell you about my digital course, Profit Podcasting, because the doors are opening again at the end of August for only a short period of time. So if you've listened to a few podcast episodes or you've enjoyed any of the content that I put out on social media or YouTube, then you're going to love this digital course because I walk you through everything you need to know in order to start, launch, and market your podcast in just 30 days. So if you want to be the first to know when doors open again on August 30th, go to krystalprofit.com/podcast course and join the wait list. But let's get back to how you can find your audience. So the first step in finding your audience is you need to understand your audience. So who are they? Or who do you want them to be? This could be an ideal listener or what some people refer to as your ideal customer avatar. Or it could be the people that are already asking you for the content that you're creating or that you want to create. So do you have friends and family that ask you the same questions over and over and over again? Because those, and like, do you actually want to answer those? That's another like part of the puzzle too, is like the people that you actually want to talk to, that you want to interact with. Because I know people, and I've been in this situation too, where you're really, really good at something, but you don't necessarily love it. So I had a job one time where I was in the corporate world. I was doing accounting stuff. It was a lot of bookkeeping and like project accountant stuff. And people kept telling me like, oh, you're so good at that. And I did not like that job whatsoever. There were some aspects of it I enjoyed, and that was really just interacting with other people, but I did not love the work. So keep that in mind, that like if you've picked a topic, but then you realize the people that you're going to attract to listen to that show, if you don't like interacting with those kind of people, then you might want to rethink your podcast. I hope that makes sense. So you want to get very specific about who your ideal listener is. So for me, I like to look at it by their age and their gender, and then like the typical like demographic stuff. Like, are they married? Are they single? Do they have kids? What do they like to do for fun? What are their favorite TV shows or their movies? What are their other favorite podcasts? Like, right? Like the general demographic things that you would fill out on like a survey, right? Like, what is your age? What do you do for a living? You know, what's your household income? Like all of those basic demographics. I want you to consider who either your audience is already or who you want them to be, right? Because you can totally make all this up. If there's a certain person that you're trying to attract to your podcast, you need to know that. You actually need to write these things down and not just have them swirling around in your brain, right? Because if someone were to ask you, what is your podcast about? Who is it for? You want to be able to be very specific about who it's for. That way someone can identify with whether your podcast is for them or it's not. Because you want them to know, like in a few seconds, like, oh, I would love to listen to that. Or, you know, make them think of someone else. Like, that's not really for me, but I know someone else that like they would love that. They would love to talk about, you know, crafting guitar strings or something. I don't know. That was really random. It's the first thing that popped into my head. But, I'm sure there's a podcast out there. So if there's not, you could create one if you wanted to talk to guitarists and musicians and that's what y'all wanted to talk about. But then I want you to do like all the surface level stuff for your ideal listener. And then I want you to go a little bit deeper. So what are their, like some of their biggest fears and what are some of their biggest dreams? So I know if you're listening to this podcast, maybe one of your biggest fears is the overwhelm of technology, because that's where a lot of people get tripped up when it comes to podcasting. Like the software, they look at Audacity and they're just like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. Or they think about all the technical aspects of doing anything online and they're just totally overwhelmed. Like I know this because I see it all the time. And it's something that people tell me, they're like, I'm nervous to even try with this software because I don't know how to use it. And I'm like, well, of course you don't know how to use it. Why would you? I didn't know how to use any of the stuff before I started. But it's just understanding their fears and then some of their biggest dreams. I know if you're listening to this, then you're probably one of your biggest dreams right now is to have a podcast, is to start a podcast, launch a podcast, have a successful podcast. I know this because, again, I know my listeners. Or maybe one of your biggest dreams is to have a successful podcast that funds your lifestyle. Maybe you want to have a podcast you create a business around eventually, or you want to sell your own products or services or whatever it is. I know that some of these are things that people have told me that this is what their biggest dreams are. So really understanding your listeners are very important. And then what else do they like to do? Like, do they listen to other podcasts? And if they do, where do they listen to them? Like, this is really getting in deeper. Like, are they running on the treadmill? Are they driving to work? Are they working in their garage? Are they, like, what are they doing when they're actually listening to your podcast? And then what are some of the biggest problems that they face? So I know Nanette, she has the Ediful Gardens podcast. Nanette is my mom. That sounds weird to say Nanette, but she's one of my students that have gone through the Profit Podcasting course. And I know for her, one of the biggest problems that her listeners face are soil problems. Like she talks about soil is like the number one thing that is most important in the garden. And a lot of people face the struggle with having really good quality soil, or, things aren't moving fast enough. Like they want to have this luscious Garden of Eden type of garden. And, she tells them like, well, you can and you will, but you got to put in the work first. You got to make sure that the foundation is there. So just really understanding the biggest problems that your listeners face and how you can help them. How can you add value to them? I say this all the time, but value, value, value. You want to understand what you can offer your listeners, because then they're going to be more inclined to come back over and over and over again, because you're making their life easier, or you're saving them money, or you're educating them, or you are entertaining them, if that's your thing. If you were just simply there, you're showing up every week and you're just entertaining the crap out of people, then kudos to you, because I love that. I've listened to The Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, and he's hilarious. And I love, like, there was an interview with him and Will Ferrell, and I listened to that solely for the purpose of entertainment, because I love Will Ferrell and I think Dax Shepard is hilarious. So yeah, I mean, even if that's your only thing is to entertain people, but again, they know who their ideal people are, their ideal audience, because they know the jokes to deliver. They know the conversations to have that are going to make people laugh. So just know that you need to understand who your ideal listener is, your ideal audience, before you get too hung up in creating content. Or if you've already created content and things aren't hitting, or you're not getting the success as you define it that you want, then make sure you're really paying attention to who your ideal listener is and what they want. So the next thing I want you to consider is
being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Where does your ideal listener hang out online? So what social platforms are they on? Do they like YouTube? Are they only on LinkedIn? Do they love Twitter? Or are they just on social media for Insta stories and the occasional Facebook lives? Like, you need to know this about your audience, because this is where you have a great opportunity to interact with them. You can join Facebook groups. This is one of my favorite things. Like, this is my secret hack, if you want to call it that, is I hang out in a lot of Facebook groups where my ideal listener hangs out. So if we'll just pull back the curtain here, right? So my ideal listener and the person that I am directly speaking to anytime I turn on my microphone is a woman between the ages of 24 and 45 who is looking for a creative outlet and a way to use her voice to create an online business and make an impact, like a bigger impact in the world. Like, that is, and I'm not going to go into I have a whole, there was an exercise I did in a course once. And so I have several pages of PDFs full of the deepest desires of her heart and all kinds of stuff. But I know on a pretty quick snap judgment, I can tell you whether you're going to enjoy my podcast or not, because I've interacted so much with my ideal listeners, and I know where they hang out, and I know which Facebook groups are for they would be interested in listening to me, or me attracting them to me, and which ones aren't. So to be kind of specific, is a lot of groups online for female entrepreneurs. They get really cutesy with their names on Facebook, the Facebook groups. And I can tell you, I intentionally do not join those. There's some that are I'm trying to think of one of them. I guess I shouldn't list them out, right? Because I don't want to, if you're part of one of these groups or you run one of these groups, I don't want to offend anybody. But there are some groups out there that have the super cutesy names in them, and that's not my ideal listener. She doesn't hang out there. My ideal listener is hanging out in groups that are about growing an online business, or supporting other women who are entrepreneurs, or helping each other out in ways that can be beneficial to the larger, group of us, the community of us as a whole, as online business entrepreneurs. So just know who your audience is. Where do they hang out online? Where can you go get in front of them, in front of these other groups? So another thing to consider is, where does your listener hang out in person? If that's what your audience is into, or if that is something that your podcast, is around an activity or something. I know that there are a lot of podcasts about action sports, or I guess sports in general. It doesn't have to be an action sport, and hobbies. So are there places that you could potentially meet other listeners? And this isn't necessarily a networking thing. I guess it could be. You could go to a huge conference and go network with people. But I'm thinking about on a more local level, to really understand your audience more. That way you can reach more people, either through word of mouth or connecting with maybe there's a group that you meet with in person, and then, hey, you find out they have a Facebook group with thousands of people just like them that are hanging out every day and they're posting about stuff, or they're going to other events, or they're traveling around the world doing like cool things. Then, you kind of want to know what that is, that where they're hanging out online and in person. But I did mention conferences. Are there conferences related to your podcast topic or something similar in your industry? So, a great example I have, y'all, and this is really pulling back the curtain and telling you about, I guess I shouldn't call it a failure, but it's just one of those other things that I've tried in my many years of kind of just throwing things in the air and seeing what's going to work. I went to, I wrote a book. So I wrote a devotional book a few years ago, and I published it, and I was just gung-ho, like, I'm going to be a writer. And I was staying at home. This was in 2014, 2015, around that time. And I'd already finished my other book, or I was in the process of working on it. I think I was editing it at that point. And my oldest son, we had an idea of writing a children's book together. So we wrote this cute little story, and I'm a terrible artist. I'm not an illustrator whatsoever. But I had an idea to attend this children's book conference that I found out about. And it's SCBWI. I always butcher that. But it's oh my gosh, I can't even think of what it is. It's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So I think that's right. I'm going to make sure. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. But so if you're interested, if this is your thing, if you're a writer or you want to be a writer, then I suggest go check them out for children's literature. But I wrote this book. It's called King Trey Zico's Journey into the Jungle. You will not find it on Amazon. You will not find it anywhere because it is a PDF document still on my computer, yet to be put out into the world. But I wanted to learn more about writing children's books. So I went to this conference, and I ended up connecting with several people. I actually did have one of them on the podcast last year, and that was Jess. If you want to learn about donkeys, then she wrote a children's book about donkeys, and she is an activist for donkey rescues, and she's a super awesome person. And I'll link to her episode in the show notes. That way you can go buy her book and support her. But I went to this conference to learn more about children's book authors and how the industry works and learning about publishing. And I learned so much being there. But it just goes to show you that there are literally conferences and activities and meetups and all kinds of stuff out there for anybody within any industry. So I highly suggest that you pay attention, listen to your audience and get to know them better. Where do they go do something on the weekends that you could, potentially get in front of them, or, you could go talk, have these in-depth conversations and learn more about them. What do they enjoy? What are they looking for in a podcast? Or do they want to hear a podcast once a week? Do they want to hear a podcast every day? Really understanding your audience. That way you can find more of them. That's really the bottom line is how do you find your audience? It's you have to identify who they are, where they hang out with, or where they hang out, and then how can you find more of them? Because there are collective people out there in the world, but you don't want to try to talk to everybody. You want to try to talk to one specific person, and then people will start identifying as that specific person, and they will be drawn to you. I think that a lot of people, they like that I reference Friends a lot. I'm obsessed with Friends. Even still, it's been 15 years since it's been off the air, which makes me feel so old. But, Friends has been off the air forever, but I still watch it all the time on Netflix. And I make references to it. I use GIFs from Friends, all the time when I'm texting my husband, when I'm texting friends on Instagram. I love Friends so much. And, but I know that my ideal listener gets it. even if they weren't like a super fan of Friends, they know who Monica is. They know Chandler. They know Joey, Rachel, Ross, like Phoebe. They know the whole crew, and they'll at least get my references because I know my audience. I know y'all. I know that y'all get these things. So one of the last few things I want to talk about is I want you to consider, is there already an audience out there online that you can get in front of? So I want you to think of people that are similar to you in your industry or even complementary to what you do. So for me, a great example is Pat Flynn. So if you don't know who Pat Flynn is, he's kind of like the go-to guy for podcasting. Well, my goal, full transparency, throwing this out there, is I want to be the female version of Pat Flynn, like the go-to woman that people go to for podcasting and podcasting questions and all things podcasting. Like, that's what I want to do. But in order to kind of get going, I studied a lot of what he does and what he did whenever I was just getting started. And I got a lot of insight to who his listeners were and realized that his audience is very different from mine. And he has more of an appeal to people that are looking for passive income, because that's what his podcast is. It's smart passive income. And I'm have an audience that's more geared to just podcasting and understanding everything there is to know about podcasting or how they can get better at podcasting. So I want you to think of, like, who's the one person? Like, I want you to take a few seconds right now in your industry, the topic of your podcast. Who is the one person that you know that has, maybe they don't have a podcast, maybe they have a YouTube channel, or maybe they have a blog, or maybe they have a TV show, whatever it is. But I want you to start consuming their content to understand who their audience is or where their audience hangs out, and how you can kind of mirror what they do to understand their audience. That way you can find more of them, right? I mean, I'm not just going to say, oh, go poach their audience from them, because I don't think that's right. But I do think that you should consider, what do you have to offer their audience? Or what can you offer their audience? Then, like, where are the holes in what the content that they're producing? Like, what could you make better, or what could you make different that has your perspective and has your spin on it? But the other thing I talked about is complementary audiences. And that would be like, if you are, health and nutrition work really, really well together. So if you're a nutritionist, are there podcasts out there that focus on health and well-being that you could start watching who their audience is and where they hang out online and what are their hopes, what are their dreams, what are their fears, like what are all these things? And I know that this is a thing because I've been asked to be like a million times parts of Facebook groups that have to do with health and nutrition. And so I know that they're out there, and I know that that is not specific to just this topic. So I know your audience is out there online somewhere. They're hanging out, talking about stuff that you could, say, hey, I've got a podcast about this. Or you could just start adding value to them, and then the conversation happens organically and naturally. And you just say, hey, by the way, I have a podcast about this. I'm never going to tell you that you should go and spam everybody like, hey, listen to my podcast. I got a podcast. It's amazing. Like, that's not a great way to find your ideal audience. And you can actually turn a lot of people off by doing that. But I do think that it's cool when you start hanging out in a community online long enough, and then people actually just start plugging you. I've been in several Facebook groups where people are like, oh, you need to talk to Krystal about podcasting. Like, that's her thing. And that's because I go in and I continuously offer value in these Facebook groups, and people are starting to recognize, oh, like, that's what she does. So how can you go into these groups or go online and be known as the person that does what you do or has a podcast about what you have a podcast about? So the last thing I want to talk about is get creative. I want you to get creative in order to get in front of your audience. So don't just try to think of, how can I get in front of more of my friends and family members? Because I'll just be honest, they may or may not be interested in what you're actually talking about. I'm sure that they love you. I'm sure that they are trying to support you. But at the end of the day, are they going to be the ones who come back week after week and tune in to everything that you have to say? Maybe, maybe not. So you want to find those people who are passionate, like super passionate about your topic, because they're going to be the ones who are passionate with you and they're excited about what you're doing and they're interested in what you're talking about and they want to know more, or they want to have the tools and resources that you have to offer them, or they want the content that you're putting out. So just get creative with it. Like, what are some ways that you can get in front of more people, or you can find more of your audience that you already know? Like, they're out there. They're out there. If you have a health and fitness podcast, then how can you get in front of those girls that love Lululemon, right? And it's funny because I don't actually own any Lululemon, but I know what they are, like the yoga pants. So, like, if that's your thing, then, like, how can you get in front of those people? Or if you have a podcast about, crafting, how can you get in front of more crafters? Or if you have a podcast about speedboat racing, then how can you get into those circles of people where they just love to talk about speedboats? Or, I could go on and on. Like, I definitely am never short on ideas on how you can get in front of an audience. So if you have any specific questions, if you're saying, well, my topic is too specific, that's actually a good thing, because somebody's going to see your podcast and say, oh my gosh, like, this is for me. That is what you want your ideal listener to do. You want them to say, this is what I've been looking for, or this is exactly what I've been needing to get my hands on. And, then you just deliver. You deliver that amazing content that only you can deliver with a message that you have. So just to recap everything that we covered, because we talked about a lot today. We talked about needing to understand your audience first. Who do you want to talk to? Who are you talking to? So you need to understand that first. And then, where do they hang out online? Or where do they hang out in person? And is there already an audience that you can get in front of? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Are there people already out there consuming content similar to yours or complementary to yours that you can get in front of? And the last thing is just get creative with it. Like, don't be so strict and rigid on like who you can talk to, who you can't talk to. Just get creative. Like, find ways to get out in front of your audience and throw some stuff out there. Some stuff will stick, some stuff won't, but just really capitalize on the people that are already hanging out and listening to you every week, or that are asking you, hey, when's your podcast coming out? Because those are the people that are going to be with you for life. They're going to hang out with you every single week, and they're going to be so supportive of everything that you're doing. But that does it for this episode. So I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for me to say thank you for showing up this week. Thank you for listening to this episode and for being part of the Profit Podcast audience, because I'm having a lot of fun, guys. Like, this is, I don't know what it is about podcasting. It's just, I think it's because I love to talk, first of all. Like, I really do. I love to talk. But it's like a creative outlet for me. It's a challenge to come up with new content ideas. It's a creative challenge that I've fallen in love with. I feel like I'm solving problems for you guys. Like, whenever you come to me and say, how do I do this? And most of the time, I'll be honest, I don't know all the answers, but it's like, I feel like I'm getting a quest. Like, I feel like Indiana Jones. Like, I'm getting handed this assignment. Like, okay, you've got to go find the Holy Grail, and I go out searching for the answers, and then I'm happy to come back and deliver to you every week and let you know this is what I found. And so I just really appreciate you showing up here today and listening to this episode, because it means so much to me. But that does it for today. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe to the show and hear what other fun things we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks, Be sure to sign up for the 5-day podcast bootcamp and check out the other great resources we have in our resource library. And remember, if you're interested at all in Profit Podcasting, the digital course, then join our waitlist and be notified whenever the doors open on August 30th, because they're only going to be open for a short period of time. And go to krystalprofit.com/episode 74 to grab all of the show notes for everything that we talked about today. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, "Send Krystal a text message." And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, "Send Krystal a text message." And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.